This week's Torah reading, Lech Lecha, is God's first words to Abram, commanding Abram to leave his familiar land, his home, his birthplace, and to go to a land that God will show him. And God tests Abram in that way, sight unseen. Abraham heads off and winds up in Canaan, in what will become Israel. And the places that Abraham journeys, those will be lands that will not necessarily be part of the modern state of Israel. What many call today Yehuda and Shomron, or the West Bank, are key areas in which Abraham will wander. That's to say, which will lead into the focus tonight, that there is a biblical land that is more than the modern state of Israel. Tonight, I want to honor the memory of Yitzhak Rabin, for it is on this date, this very day, actually before the sunset, it was on Friday, the 12th of Mar Cheshvan on the Hebrew calendar, that Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated 25 years ago. And Yitzhak Rabin still looms as a giant among our people, a soldier who fought for peace. And so tonight, in honor of his life, I would like to share a little bit about his life, his tragic assassination, and some lessons to learn. Yitzhak Rabin was born on March 1st, 1922. His parents were immigrants to Israel, and foreshadowing, Yitzhak Rabin would become the first prime minister of Israel who was born in the land of Israel. His youth was that largely in his teen years of being in an agricultural school, a school called the Kaduri School, that famous philanthropist from India, British servants who achieved great wealth, who created in the Holy Land a school to learn about agriculture, which Yitzhak, as a boy, failed the entrance exam. But once he did get in, he became a star student. And there, during World War II, when he was only 15 years old, he would meet Yigal Allon, who would become the head of Israel Defense Forces, and who would cultivate him to become a member of the Palmach, which was still under British occupation, an illegal organization. And I would add, in regard to English occupation, Yitzhak Rabin did not have a particular interest as a youth in learning English, because that was the language of the occupiers. With the mentorship of Yigal Allon, he would go on to become chief operating officer during the 1948 War of Independence. He would be responsible for enabling convoys to reach Jerusalem, a unit that had a 50% injury-fatality rate. He would ultimately devote many years of his life, 27 years, to the army, rising in the ranks, becoming the head of the army. From there, becoming Israel's ambassador to the United States, which he would do for 5 years, 1968 to 1973. 1973. And as prime minister, he would return right after the Yom Kippur War, when there was a resignation of Golda Meir, the prime minister. And as a prime minister, he would sign the withdrawal, the Sinai Interim Agreement, and at the same time, he would be responsible for that commando raid in Uganda, the Entebbe raid. So he already early on in the 70s developed this mindset of needing to be strong in defense and strong in the pursuit of peace. In 1992, Yitzhak Rabin was reelected as prime minister with a joint agreement with Shimon Peres to pursue peace with the Palestinians. And in that light, he signed a peace agreement called the Oslo Accords soon after becoming prime minister, which would lead in 1994, along with Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat, to winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Some quotes of Yitzhak Rabin in this journey from soldier to peacemaker. He said in 1994, I will add he was assassinated a year later, November 1995, he said in his Nobel Prize lecture, "There is only one radical means of sanctifying human lives, not armored plating or tanks or planes or concrete fortifications. The only radical solution is peace." And after the signing of the Oslo Peace Agreement, there was an outbreak of terrorist attacks in Israel. And he then said, we must fight terrorism as if there's no peace process and work to achieve peace as if there's no terror. 6 months later, I take that back, a year before his assassination, roughly, in addressing the U.S. Congress, he said, and this is post the Oslo agreements where details still had to be worked out, withdrawal potentially had to be achieved to enable the creation of a Palestinian state. And he said, I, military ID number 30743, retired general in the Israel Defense Forces in the past, consider myself to be a soldier in the Army of Peace today. I, who served my country for 27 years as a soldier, I say to you, to your Majesty, the King of Jordan, I say to you, our American friends, today we are embarking on a battle which has no dead and no wounded, no blood and no anguish. This is the only battle which is a pleasure to wage, the battle for peace. And the night that he was assassinated, he spoke in Tel Aviv, in the large public square, and it was a peace for nonviolence. As he was departing from that large gathering, having just sang a song for peace, he said in his address, I was a military man for 27 years. I fought as long as there was no prospects for peace. Today, I believe that there are prospects for peace, great prospects. We must take advantage of this for the sake of those standing here and for the sake of those who do not stand here, and they are many among our people. November 4th, 1995. The person whose name is not worth mentioning by name, who assassinated this courageous pursuer of peace, was a law student. He was an educated man, a zealot for maintaining those pieces of land that I described at the outset, that God would describe to Abraham when he reached that promised land. God would say, "This land I give to you and to your descendants." And this zealot, educated in some of the militant, religious yeshivot, places of the study of Talmud in Israel, was taught by his rabbis that Yitzhak Rabin was what's called a rodef, one who is pursuing you to kill you. The Talmud teaches, as does American law, that in self-defense you can kill such a person. And as those rabbis taught, that future killer, by virtue of Yitzhak Rabin seeking to give back Holy Land, it was as if he was killing the people, the land of Israel. And that to kill this man was to fulfill a divine decree. There's another concept that was widely taught, and that's to be a din moser. One is called the din rodef, the law of the pursuer. The other is the din moser, the law of the informer, where there too, the one who is a traitor to a country, to a cause, the penalty is the death penalty. And so this pursuer saw Rabin as a pursuer. It was only 2 shots that would kill him. I pause as if my breath is taken away with the recognition of the enormous loss for what was yet unfulfilled, what is still unfulfilled, the possibilities of peace with Palestinians. Yitzhak Rabin, precisely because he was an important military leader, had the credibility to find a campaign for peace. And that campaign for peace never regained its momentum. But I am reminded on this night as well, the power of words, the power of rallies by Yitzhak Rabin's opponents, many, the leaders of the right wing, which is now the center of Israel today, who walked with signs that had pictures of Rabin dressed as if he was the enemy of the people of Israel, signs that said he is a rodef. In fact, members of the Likud accompanying a coffin in a protest that had the name Yitzhak Rabin on it, a protest against giving back land that was holy land for peace. Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, we honor Yitzhak Rabin 25 years since the tragedy of his murder. And we yet yearn for peace. And we do so knowing the power of ideas and the power of words by leaders to take younger zealots and lead them in destructive paths. May our leaders use words for good. May we regain our momentum as a Jewish people and as a world in the pursuit of peace. Amen.
Amen.